Hello and good evening. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's winter tree identification program. I'm Ranger Elena and I work at the Refuge. I have the pleasure of moderating the program. And to start off, we're going to begin with a brief message from the Friends of Sherburne. They are a partner organization that supports the Refuge and in many, many ways. And Myrna Kruger is here to fill you in.
Hey, Elena, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here tonight to just share a couple things about the Friends and tell you about our store. So we have now over 450 members. We're really passionate about the Refuge, and in supporting it, we help to support like nature education for kids and for adults. We provide funding for improvements to visitor facilities like the first stop on the wildlife drive. You might have been there since it was improved this past year. And we also support and fund the Wildlife Festival, which is usually in the fall. And it's a great event for the public. And we want it to be free and open to everybody to come. And so we support that with some funding and other refuge events throughout the year. And we are the Friends of Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge. Okay, ready for the next slide? Great. And we would love it if you would join the Friends. So for a $20 donation, that's not much, you can get the up-to-date news from the Refuge. We have paper newsletter, an e-newsletter, and if you join, you get 10% off in the nature store. And also the best thing is you're supporting the Refuge. So go to our website at exploresherburne.org, the membership page, and you can find the link there to sign up tonight. Okay, next one. And now online, you might have heard, we do have a nature store, the Eagle's Nest store, and it is online it came online in December. We're offering especially things good for now, like knit caps and fleece headbands. These are branded with the Refuge branding on there. We've got woolen mittens that have a fleece lining. They're pretty special. We have special Refuge face masks, puzzles, stuffed animals for kids, and field guides really for all ages and naturalists. And our website is SherburneEaglesNestStore.com. You see it there on the bottom, and I'll post that link in the feed as we get going. And really appropriate for tonight, we've got some books about trees. One is a guide, the Trees of Minnesota Field Guide. And then we also have a really interesting book, The Hidden Life of Trees, which is a nonfiction book about trees and how they communicate with each other and other plants. And so it's pretty interesting. Anyway, with that, I wanted to turn it back to you, Elena. Thank you. And looking forward to the program.
All right, thank you so much, Myrna. Next up, I'm just going to briefly go over some housekeeping for tonight's program. So like the majority of our programs, this will be recorded and available to watch later on the Friends Facebook page. So you can go to the Facebook page, and under the videos tab, you should easily find tonight's program down the road, so you can share it with others, or if you need to come back and review it, it'll be there for you. Jenny has a wonderful and informative program put together for us tonight. Even so, I imagine that you're going to have questions that she doesn't answer throughout. So we, both of us, encourage you to comment throughout, post your questions in the chat. or in the comments section. And we'll see, we might be able to answer them as we go through the program. Otherwise, we have a designated Q&A section at the end. And our goal is to answer all of the questions while we're live tonight. But if we happen to run out of time, we will follow up after the program and answer those in the comments. With that, I'm gonna introduce Jenny, Naturalist Jenny, who's here with us tonight. We're happy to see her. And she's here to talk to us about the winter tree identification, what you guys are here for tonight. We're excited. This is a topic that's often popular this time of year, and it was requested by individuals on our Facebook page. We kind of when Jenny and I were putting together our winter programming, we wanted to hear from you. So this program is thanks to those individuals that put forth that. So Naturalist Jenny, I'm gonna let you take it away from here tonight.
All right, thanks so much, Elena. Yeah, and I do appreciate the comments we got, letting us know what subjects we were interested in, because it does help us. I mean, we all have our own particular interests, but it's a lot of fun to be able to see what people who are on our Facebook page actually want to see, so that we can present about that too. Yeah. All right, so I think we will pop into it then. And winter trees here, we are going to focus on the deciduous trees, which are the trees that lose their leaves in the winter. We could talk about coniferous trees, and maybe we'll do another program, maybe not, about that. But they keep their needles all year, so they're pretty easy to identify any time of the year. And with deciduous trees, of course, in the winter, where are all the leaves, right? That's a very good question. Obviously, these trees lose their leaves in the fall, and they don't really have them throughout the winter. So if we see a tree in the winter, how on earth are we supposed to be able to identify them, right? Well, there's actually quite a lot of features that help you determine what tree is what when you're looking at it. So we'll talk a little bit about twigs. They have a couple components to them that help in ID. We'll also talk about the bark of trees, which is a really easy thing to look at. Sometimes it can be hard to ID, but we'll talk about that. We'll also look at some other characteristics, such as the shape of the tree, any dead leaves or seeds that might be nearby, even the habitat that the trees are in. Those can all help us when we're identifying a tree in the winter, especially when there's no leaves. So the first thing we will talk about are twigs, buds, and leaves. Well, leaf scars, right? Since we don't have leaves. I wish we did. Obviously, my brain thinks we should. But twigs, buds, and leaf scars. It sounds like a lot, but this stuff is actually pretty easy to look at. The first thing we'll talk about quick are the twigs, which have all of these other components on them. But when you're looking at a twig, there are certain things like the size that can maybe indicate which group of trees you might be looking at. You see these two twigs on your left. One is called stout and the other one is slender. That's basically just kind of the thinness of the twig. So stout twigs, they almost kind of look like pencils maybe, like they end very abruptly, and they're kind of thick when it comes to comparing twigs. Ash trees are well known for having very stout twigs. Of course, on the other spectrum are the slender twigs, which maybe look a little more delicate. They're definitely much thinner when you're looking at them, even from the ground looking up, and those ones are considered slender. You look at the color of a twig, that can be really important too. Twigs can vary from brown to greenish, yellowish, white. There's many different colors, even reddish you can see on some twigs. And that can help you narrow down what tree you are looking at. There's also one other thing on the twig called the lenticels, which is just a fancy name for a pore. It's kind of just a place where they do gas exchange between the air and the inside of the tree. And they usually just look like little dots or really small like slash marks on a twig, or maybe a larger branch. Sometimes those are raised and colorful. Sometimes they're very hard to see on a tree, and that can tell you too what kind of tree you're looking at as well. When it comes to buds, so buds are basically a group of cells that in the springtime, they either turn into leaves, flowers, or maybe another twig. And they usually have what are called scales on them. They're basically just coverings to protect them before they turn into a leaf or a flower or something like that. And each tree kind of has a different number of them. Typically, you might see like 1 bud scale, 3 or maybe 5 or more. Those are kind of the typical groupings that we look at with that. And you notice there's kind of 2 different kinds of buds on a twig. There are the terminal buds, which is just the buds that are at the tip of the twig. They can oftentimes look bigger or a little bit different than the other buds, which are called lateral buds. Sorry to look at my notes because I couldn't remember. Lateral buds are the buds that come off on the side. And these buds actually come off in 2 very important patterns that can help you determine at least what group of trees you might be looking at. So alternate is probably the most common pattern that we see, at least in Minnesota. And that just means the buds come off kind of, one comes off and then another one and then another one. All the twigs on this picture here, on all of these pictures here, show that alternate pattern. There is also what is called an opposite pattern, where the buds are kind of right next to each other as they go up the twig. And we'll see that in one of the trees that I talk about a little bit later. And then the last thing to mention are leaf scars. So when a leaf falls off of a tree, the stem or the petiole of the leaf where it connects to the twig actually leaves what is called a leaf scar. And that's basically kind of, sometimes they're circular, they might be moon-shaped, half circle. It depends on the species or type of tree that you're looking at. And a lot of them have these little dots on them, if you notice. And leaf scars are located just below the buds. So if you find a bud, you can look just below it, and it's usually the marking there. And they have these little dots on them, and those are actually the veins, or they used to be where the veins came through from the twig into the leaf or the flower or whatever you're looking at. And that helps exchange nutrients between, say, the leaf and the rest of the tree. So those can be good indicators of things. Some of the other characteristics that we'll look at too include the shape of the tree. So some species of trees actually show very specific shapes, unless they're growing in weird places. Sometimes plants grow weird, but typically you will see specific shapes to trees. A bur oak, which is one we'll talk about later, kind of has a rounded shape, or ash trees are often known to have kind of a vase type shape to their branches. Once those branches start coming off the trunk, they make a specific shape. Bark can be another really important characteristic. Sometimes it's kind of helpful. Sometimes it's really helpful depending on what tree you're looking at. And you can even look at the picture on the left here. You can see 2 different kind of barks in this picture really easily. There's kind of that smooth white bark with black markings on it, usually indicating you're looking at some kind of a birch tree or cottonwood, something like that. And the tree a bit closer there kind of has that brown, maybe coarser texture. I mean, you can definitely see that texture when you're up close to the trees too. It's very easy to see it. But you can tell it kind of has that grayish, dark brown type color that a lot of trees can be. Habitat is another really important thing you look for. Plants, that includes trees, grow in certain areas, and they don't grow in some other areas that maybe are a little too extreme for them. If you look at, for example, maybe a bur oak, if you were in a swamp, I would be very surprised if you saw a bur oak there, because they like to be in very high and dry areas. That's just kind of where they've always grown, and that's how they adapted, is to grow in those dry environments. So if you're in a swamp, you probably don't have to have bur oak in your head when you're looking at the trees. One of the other cool things is, yeah, okay, the leaves, they did fall off the tree, but they happen to be on the ground below you. So not only are you going to look up to identify the tree, but I would look down too at the ground, because you might find a lot of dead leaves there. Granted, the leaf you find right below a tree may not actually be from the tree you're standing next to, but you can kind of get an idea, you know, maybe that little group of trees around you, those are kind of the leaves that you see. So you can narrow it down from there. Seeds as well. Oftentimes you'll find seeds on the ground, such as these box elder helicopters, often seen in maple trees and stuff like that. These ones in the picture here happen to actually be still on the tree. This is from one in our backyard, and it likes to hold on to those seeds for a while. I'm not sure why. It might just be in a very protected area. So these are some of the other characteristics we'll look at. And you kind of want to look at a range of characteristics. There are a few trees where if you see a specific thing on it, it is definitely that tree and not another tree. But looking for other characteristics can kind of help you maybe solidify what you're looking at, so that you know, yep, it's definitely that species because of this, this, and this. That certainly helps. So the last main thing I'll talk about here before we get into some tree species are some resources that might be able to help you. I'm sure if you watch a lot of these Facebook Live programs from all of the nature organizations and stuff, they are going to beat it into your head that iNaturalist is a really great resource. And that's because it is. It's a really cool website and app. It's free to sign up. You just need an account. And you can look at, people will post photos of wildlife, plants, anything nature related that can be identified through pictures. And the people who post the pictures might know what the ID is, but if you don't know, there's a lot of experts and even some amateurs that are learning that maybe know some stuff that could help identify that, and they will identify it for you, and then you'll know, hey, I identified it right, or oh, I was really close, and it's great to have that help. iNaturalist, if you want to post pictures, I would say post as many different kinds of pictures as you can of the tree. So if you find a tree, take a picture of the bark. That's a good one. Take a picture kind of far out so they can see the shape of the tree. If there's leaves nearby, maybe take some photos of those. Take a picture of the twig. All of those pictures added together can kind of help form a storyline maybe of what tree you're looking at, and that can help other people ID too. And it can help people who, if you got the ID right, they can look at that and go, oh, okay, I'm looking for those characteristics if I see that tree. Another website that you might not think would be worth looking at is Minnesota Wildflowers. This is a really, really good website. Of course, obviously it's great for wildflowers too, right? But they have trees on here too. So if you maybe think, oh, I'm not sure if it's a silver maple or a red maple, you can go onto the site, type it in, and compare the two species. They talk about similar species, and you can also just look at them maybe on different screens or something like that. So you can get an idea of what you're doing. I know they do have an app that you can load on your phone too, that has been very helpful for some people. These other two resources I have on here work with dichotomous keys, and I'll talk about what those are in a bit. It sounds confusing, but it's actually really helpful. The University of Minnesota Extension has some really good resources. If you type in University of Minnesota Extension tree identification, it will bring you to a tree identification site. They have some really good guides for trees that have leaves on them. They also have a really good, really nifty, really small guide, because I printed it out too small, of winter twigs that can be very helpful when identifying these things if you can get a twig in hand. Another resource obviously would be books. I would say that Trees of Minnesota book that was mentioned by Myrna earlier can be a really good resource. Sometimes those books tend to focus on leaves, which can be really helpful some of the time, but in the winter it might be a little more difficult. So you might want, say, a winter tree finder. It says winter right on it, right? So we know that it's good for identifying in the winter. This is a really good book. It's pretty small. It fits in my pocket. It's really easy to carry with me so that I can go through the key. It does have more tree species than we have here in Minnesota. So if it seems a little daunting, maybe you can just use the University of Minnesota Extension one until you get used to everything and you kind of know. And like I said, the Winter Tree Finder and the Minnesota Extension Twig Guide is a dichotomous key, which is basically just a series of questions you follow to get to your tree species. So they might start out with, are the buds opposite on the tree? Yes or no? Yes, then you go to number 2 or something like that. And then you kind of narrow it down from there with more characteristics. If it, say, isn't alternate, which would probably mean it was opposite, then they'd send you to another section of the dichotomous key, and you still work yourself down until you get to that one species. And you just need to know a few terms. Most books have them right in the front. so you know what they are and you can reference them if they say them later in the key and you're like, I don't remember what it is. So these resources can be incredibly helpful if you're not sure what you're looking at. You can always find somebody who knows some trees too, maybe do some social distance hiking at the refuge and figure out what they are. So now we are going to get into a few trees here. And these trees are pretty commonly found on the refuge. A lot of the pictures I took were from the Oak Savannah Learning Center trails. Granted, I went and tried to take these pictures on Saturday and it was really cold and I could only be out for like 10 minutes before my nose and my face told me that it was much too cold to be out. So some of these pictures are from my backyard too, but you can find these trees pretty typically in these areas, and I think these are relatively easy to identify trees. It'll kind of help you start out your winter tree identification. So we'll look at a couple oak trees, cottonwood, a box elder, and a cherry tree. So our first tree, which you got a sneak peek of, is our bur oak tree. I would say this is my favorite tree, but when I was doing this presentation and all the rest of the trees, I was like, well, it's one of my favorites, not necessarily my favorite, because I do like a lot of the trees we have around here. So you'll notice with the kind of far away picture of the bur oak here, it's got kind of that rounded shape to it, right? Once the branches start growing, it kind of almost makes that rounded like shape. And this is pretty typical of bur oaks. They tend to grow in more open areas, so they have more room to spread their branches. And if you are looking for a Halloween tree to be near, I would consider this a Halloween tree because it's a pretty gnarly looking tree. The branches kind of stick out in these wavy patterns. And the branches are kind of thick, and it's really a cool tree. I would consider it a Halloween tree. And if you look at the bark, so this tree adapted to areas such as oak savannas, obviously, that have periodic fire. So in order to survive that fire, they decided they needed really, really thick bark. So these trees tend to have very thick bark, very deep ridged bark, tends to be kind of brownish gray. Unfortunately, it does look like a few other tree species that grow, but that can at least lead you in kind of the right direction, that you know it's not like a birch tree that has the smoother bark. So if we look at some of the closer up pictures here we have, so when you're looking at the twig of an oak tree, or I guess any tree, if you see at the end, so the terminal, the end of the twig, oak trees tend to have several buds at the end of it, not just one. So you might see 2, 3, 4 buds at the end of the twig. That can usually lead you to say, yep, it's an oak tree. Okay, so then our next step would be what kind of oak tree, right? Well, I would suggest looking at the branches and the twigs, especially the branches that hold the smaller twigs, because bur oaks have very corky, thick bark, even on their smaller branches. And it is a little corky, so if you press it, it is a little soft. If you can get up that high, sometimes the trees are hold their branches a little too high, but that is going to tell you that it's a bur oak. There aren't really any other oak trees, especially in Minnesota, that have that corky, thick bark on their branches. Because otherwise, a lot of their other stuff, you know, the buds might look similar to maybe like a northern red oak or something like that. But if you find that corky look on it, it's definitely a bur oak. You can look at their acorns too, but I won't talk too much about their acorns. They do kind of have like a fringed edge to the cap, and the cap almost completely covers the acorn, which is a little bit different than the northern red oak, whose acorns caps don't have the fringed edge to them. So we'll talk about one of 2 red oaks that I know are on the refuge. The northern red oak is a very cool tree. They're rather tall. I was not able to get far enough away from this tree in the cold to show you how tall it was, but these are going to be some of your upper story trees, and they tend to get pretty big. You might confuse them with bur oak, although their bark tends to be a little bit less thick. They're not as adapted to fire as the bur oak. Their bark is just not as thick. And you notice in this picture, you can kind of see there's still some leaves attached to the trees. Oaks are really funny. They oftentimes will hold onto their leaves all winter. It's like most trees tell their leaves to break off in the fall. Oaks don't really feel the need to do that. So you will often actually see leaves still attached to the trees on oak trees. They are not photosynthesizing. They're just dead leaves, and they do fall off when the new leaf starts growing. So that can be a good indication you're looking at an oak. And of course, red oaks have pointy tips to their leaves, and white oaks, which the bur oak is one of, has rounded lobes to their leaves. So if we look a little closer at some of the twigs of the red oak, you'll kind of notice this twig is actually a little reddish, right? That's kind of how it got its name. There will still be some gray on it, and you can see there that there's still several buds at the tip of the twig. And these buds are maybe a little more pointy than the bur oak. Bur oak tend to have slightly rounded buds to them, and they're a little bit smaller. And again, with the leaves, here's a northern red oak leaf. And you can see that it has pointy tips to the lobes on it. So you know it's a red oak of some kind. I will tell you, red oak and pin oak are very similar trees. Both of them can have that reddish twig. I've heard the buds are a little bit different. I think the pin oak has not as pointy buds as the red oak, but these trees do hybridize with each other, which means they're pretty closely related. So it can be kind of hard to tell, and I have read that even experts can have a hard time telling. So at least you know that it's a red oak, whether it's the northern red oak or the northern pin oak. Might be up for debate. You might have to look a little closer at some websites and books to decide if it is a northern red oak or a northern pin oak. So we will switch a little bit here and kind of go into a different kind of tree. The next tree we have here is the eastern cottonwood, and this is a very common tree. Typically it likes to be in wetter areas, so areas with maybe soggier soil, or at least where they can access the groundwater pretty easily. They're very, very fast growing. I heard from another program they can grow like 5 feet a year. So they're very fast growing trees. And if you kind of notice the bark of this cottonwood, looks to me kind of a lot like the bur oak. So that can be a little bit confusing, but oftentimes if you look up, the branches and the twigs tend to be whiter or yellowish in color, which does not indicate a bur oak. Bur oaks still have that brown coloration to their upper branches. And they're very tall trees too. I've heard they can be part of a super canopy, which is like the canopy above the canopy. So they're very tall trees, very great for wildlife and such. And we can look a little bit closer at the twigs and the buds. So you can see here that the twigs, you can see the lenticels on this, which are the little pores on there. You can actually see them on this one. Sometimes the buds are enormous, sometimes the buds are big. I've heard they can be like 3/4 of an inch long, which is very huge when it comes to buds. And they're very pointy. I tried to identify a tree that I thought was a cottonwood on the refuge, but it was so cold I couldn't tell. If you squeeze the buds of a cottonwood, it's sticky, like they have like a resin on them. But it was so cold I couldn't tell if it was sticky or not. And I was kind of not sure if it was a cottonwood or not because it was showing some other characteristics that I wasn't sure about. And the other picture, I just wanted to show you a little bit of the catkins. Sometimes those actually do persist into winter. Those are basically like old flowers of the cottonwood tree. Oh yes, and I should mention the twigs obviously look kind of yellowish or greenish. Sometimes they do have that whitish look too, like the pictures with the catkins on them. So that can kind of help lead you in the right direction. I can tell you for me, for some reason, I get the cottonwoods and the aspens mixed up. They are in the same, very similar group. So I'm not surprised that I get them mixed up, but for some reason it is tough for me. And of course I will just work on that, getting the ID right. And maybe when it's warmer, I can go and squeeze some buds and see if they are sticky or not. The next tree we will get into is kind of a cool tree. Some people don't like it because it is kind of a fast growing plant, the box elder tree. And you notice right away, look at the buds on this twig. They are actually opposite. So they have one bud on each side, and it does that all the way up the tree. And then there's usually one bud on the end, although sometimes it can look like there's three, just because there's sometimes two buds, two lateral buds right next to one of the terminal buds. And this tree is actually really easy to identify. When you get to the opposite buds, that'll put it in the maple family. Usually there are a couple other trees that have opposite ones, but maples are more typical. Box elders actually are in the maple group. And you notice their twig is very kind of purpley red. That's a pretty good indicator that what you're looking at is a box elder. Sometimes they might be a little greenish. I've seen some pretty green twigs come off of box elders. The buds tend to be kind of fuzzy. You can almost see that in here. There's kind of that white fuzz sitting on the buds. And one thing that helps me identify the box elder, if you look at the two buds that are kind of against my glove, you can see kind of there's almost like a point made between the buds. Maples tend to have that, although box elders, I think it's way more obvious. And they actually meet. Some maples don't meet. And that one to me, with the color of the twig, tells me that that's a box elder. Box elders kind of have an interesting growth. They usually have multiple trunks coming off of kind of one base area. Occasionally you will get a box elder that's just one single trunk, but for the most part, I've seen where they have several trunks growing from the base up. Which can kind of pull you away from, say, oaks or something like that if you're not sure what kind of tree it is. The last tree is really cool. Again, I wouldn't call it my favorite, but I would call it one of my favorites. It is the black cherry tree. This is actually the largest cherry species of tree in Minnesota. It can often be found in the understory of a forest, although occasionally can be found kind of out on its own. I will talk a little bit about some other characteristics, but honestly, if you see this specific bark, you are looking at a black cherry tree. A lot of people have called it, almost looks like burnt potato chips on the tree. They tend to have like blackish or very dark, kind of elliptical circle kind of pieces of bark that lift off on the edges, which is kind of where they got that burnt potato chip description to them. If we look at the twig, I would look at the beautiful bright picture. The other darker picture was my picture and it didn't come out very well. This one's from the Minnesota Wildflower site. The twig is usually reddish in color, maybe even a darker red color. And it kind of looks like it's got like a gray layer on it, which is easy to see when you're looking at a twig. And you notice the lenticels on these are kind of very distinctive. They're almost completely circular, they're raised, and they're white. That can usually lead you to some kind of a cherry. And I kept the picture, the kind of darker picture of the twig to show that these often grow in what are called spurs on the branch. So you'll have a branch, and then oftentimes instead of alternate buds right away, you have another little twig that comes off the side with buds on that. They call that a spur or a side spur, and cherries are relatively well known for having that. So they're quite twiggy trees. And one other thing, although not just the black cherry can get this, but you notice the picture that kind of looks like poo on a stick. That is actually a fungus called black knot on cherry. And it is very indicative. Quite a few cherry trees do get infected with this. So if you see it, you know you're at least looking in the cherry family. You might have to narrow it down a little bit. Choke cherries and stuff that are a little bushier can also get this on it. But again, just look for those burnt potato chip looks on it. Once you see it and know what it is, you will see it everywhere in the forest. I'm telling you, if I'm looking for black cherry, I'm like, there's one, there's one, there's one. They're pretty easy to see once they're out there. So those are the 5 trees I wanted to talk about. And honestly, I kind of mentioned this when I did the Tracks and Scat program, but oftentimes when you're out in nature looking at stuff, it's just about piecing clues together to identify your tree. If you walk up to a tree and you're like, oh, it's got that kind of white papery bark. Is it a paper birch? It certainly could be. And then you can pull out a book and say, all right, let's see if we can find a twig, and look and see if the buds look right, if the twig looks right, that kind of thing. If you're still stumped, and I will tell you, I have been stumped on trees too, you can mark that tree, maybe tie a bow around it, memorize where it was, and come back out in the spring when the leaves come out. And then that can help you go, oh, well, okay, maybe that is a bur oak tree. And then you can look at all those characteristics you were looking at in the winter and go, oh yeah, the bark looks like this. Oh, the twig has this on it. So that can be really helpful. Obviously, when you look when there's leaves on the tree, you aren't going to see those leaf scars. So you'll have to wait till winter again. But that can be something to look forward to in the winter time. So with that, I think we'll move over to questions if we have any. I'm hoping we may have a few, hopefully not too many that will stump me, but you never know.
Well, we're gonna start off with one from Twyla. As we wait to see some more questions come in. So feel free if this discussion has sparked something and you want to see if we can help you answer it, feel free to put that in the comments. The first one though is there a difference between, do identifications change on young trees and seedlings? So, you know, the characteristics you mainly pointed out were for, you know, adult mature trees with that very, you know, they've lived a good life already. So, you know, like first versus second year growth. So, you know, not only does it look different, but then is there a way to tell the difference between such young trees?
So I can struggle a little bit in identification with young trees. One good indicator is if you see an adult red oak tree and you see some baby oak trees, it might actually be a red oak tree. Oftentimes what you want to look for on really little trees, the identification is going to be what descriptions are for the twigs might actually also be descriptions for the trunk. So on like a really young cottonwood tree, the bottom of a young tree might not have that thick plate-like bark that kind of looks like the bur oak. That it might have more of the smoother yellowish, whitish color to it. The good thing with young trees is you will probably be able to look at a twig. Big trees, sometimes, you know, you're like, I can't reach the tree to see the twigs. Those young trees, you actually can see the twigs. So you can look at the buds on those and kind of get a better idea. I did forget to mention, dang it, on that black cherry tree, if you taste a twig, it tastes bitter. I forgot to mention that. So you can do that if you see maybe a young cherry tree and you're like, well, I'm pretty sure this is a cherry tree. Just taste the twig. And if it's really bitter, it's probably a cherry tree. So yeah, there's more ways than just looking and feeling. You can actually taste too. I guarantee you most trees are just going to taste like tree. But some of them have a taste to them. So yeah, so you kind of want to look for those twig bark characteristics maybe on the trunk of smaller trees.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And the buds still serve as a good indicator, and if you can see leaf scars and things like that, so you can kind of apply those things in the winter.
Exactly.
So I don't think we have any other questions coming in quite yet. So we will keep our eyes peeled for that. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and Jenny and I will try our best to answer them. We unfortunately are not encyclopedias, but we try our best.
I do have a couple books nearby me, so if I need to, I can reference a few. Yeah.
That was smart. do you have I guess a question from me? Oh, comment from Myrna. If you don't want to risk tasting the cherry twig, you can often smell the bitterness. So if
There
you don't
you
want to fully dive in and commit yourself, or if you're not, if you're not 70% sure it's a cherry tree, maybe you want to start with sniffing it.
Yeah, I mean, that works too. I had a very enthusiastic professor in college who had us taste the twig. So,
but a personal question of mine, is there a place on the Refuge you like to go that kind of has a wide variety of trees that could, be a good start for folks looking to test themselves?
Yeah. I would say it's kind of a toss-up between the first loop of Blue Hill and the Oak Savannah Learning Center trails. The first loop of Blue Hill is really cool. There's like an enchanted forest area, which has a lot of what I think are cedar trees, but they're actually needled trees. So it might be kind of cool to compare those to the deciduous trees that don't have any leaves on them. I don't know. That's kind of cool. You're pretty close to Buck Lake on that trail too, so you might see more of the wetter trees. Although again, with the Oak Savannah Learning Center trails, there's good portions of woods that are really good for seeing, especially those cherry trees and such. There used to be a lot of like willows and aspens and stuff along the edge of the Learning Center trails, which I agree were encroaching the trails a little bit. So a lot of them have been mowed. So this spring you might be looking for lower growing trees, at least for the willows and stuff like that. Most willows are considered shrubs, so you might have to look beyond a tree book. But the definition between tree and shrub is kind of ambiguous. So
yeah, it's hard because some of the shrubs can get tall enough where they look like trees, or again, your young trees versus shrubs.
Yep.
You kind of get it can be hard to discern. A lot of the shrubs have those multi-stemmed growths though,
Right.
so that can be an indicator for kind of that younger age range.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and great comment from Twyla, kind of to accompany iNaturalist. If you're out in the field, Seek is a different app powered by iNaturalist, but that's more of the identification side of it. So it's kind of like a field guide in your pocket. iNaturalist, it has a similar function in the process of submitting an observation. They have good artificial intelligence that will help you figure out, give you a general idea of kind of what you have. So iNaturalist has that kind of field guide and citizen science side to it, but Seek is a great thing to have at your fingertips as well.
Yeah, I've been kind of using it in the past year here, just trying to get an idea of it. I did try to take a picture of a twig once and it couldn't identify it as anything. So
okay.
I'm assuming that as time goes on, Seek will gain the ability to use twigs. But sometimes if the object is too small or too weird, it's like, I'm sorry, take a different picture. So then maybe you can move over to the bark or something like that. But oftentimes that does help me at least get to group. Like it'll tell me like it's an aspen or a birch, but we're not sure which one. Like, oh, okay, well then now I get to throw oaks and all the other trees out of my mind and just focus on that group. So
right, it just helps. And then even if once you start using, like you said, resources and different things like that, you can look at 3 resources and 3 different trees and compare buds and things like that versus looking at the whole gamut of things. So question from Randall regarding buckthorn. So here's a shrub that can definitely grow in and look like a tree. I have we removed some big trees of it in our backyard this fall. But Randall's question is, it's easy to identify in the summer when it has leaves. what are some ways to identify it in the winter?
Right. So unfortunately with buckthorn, it can look quite a bit similar to cherry. It kind of has that similar growth. I usually only know that from its leaves. I'm trying to think. I think it might actually have thorns on it. I think that's why they call it buckthorn. I don't think it's like loaded with thorns. It's not like prickly ash where you walk into that tree and you're gonna get cut up. But they do have some thorns on it. Black cherries do not.
Okay.
Wild plum does, but I don't know quite the differences between like wild plum and buckthorn.
Yeah, and I know buckthorn in the fall especially, I can easily identify it in my backyard because while it's still holding its leaves stay green a lot longer than everything else. So others are either turning to fall colors or have lost their leaves, and buckthorn still has that kind of brilliant green foliage. And this time of year, I would say I usually identify it by the thorns. So yeah, I think that identify it by that and the lenticels, and know that, sometimes knowing your area, if it's a more diverse habitat or a more degraded habitat, you can kind of get some clues from your area as well. But cherry is the one that I would get it confused with.
Yes. But I would say if you have a ton of buckthorn, if you remove it and accidentally pull out one cherry tree, I think that's okay because you're working at something bigger. And cherries are pretty prolific for growth. So it's okay.
Yeah, and if you have the opportunity, fall is definitely the time frame that I shoot to take care of it, just because it's sending a lot of energy back into its roots, and so that's kind of a time to kick it while it's down.
Exactly.
I don't know. Buckthorn is not my favorite, so
No, I think anyone who doesn't like it, it's because it's so crazy and hard to pull out, and not good.
And so another comment for identifying buckthorn would be the buds, that they're almost opposite but a bit offset. And so I would think that buds are alternate.
Yes, they are.
So
pretty obviously alternate too.
So you could look at the placement on the twigs. That would be a good characteristic to look at.
Okay.
Well, let's see. While we wait for our last lingering questions, I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint again, and we're going to just give you a sneak peek and teaser. Oh, that's my dog. For next week's program. We'll be back again next Thursday evening. If the slides will move for me. And we're gonna shift our focus to winter bird feeding. So we're gonna, this is another topic that was suggested by folks from the Facebook page. And so we're gonna delve into kind of ways you can attract birds to your backyard. We'll mainly focus on bird feeders, but touch on some other aspects as well, and how you can, find color during the winter. Okay. Well, we're excited to be back kind of on the bandwagon of virtual programming. And it was fun to get a closer look at winter tree identification this evening. We don't have any other questions. It's a pretty quiet night. So we are going to wrap it up for now. So we, both Jenny and I, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you.